All right, hello and welcome in, everybody. And today we have another exciting episode of the Titans of Fantasy Football podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Daigle. With me, Caleb Armstrong. Today, we're going over wide receiver tiers. So we're going to be covering, like we did last week, we went over the quarterbacks around the league and kind of how we have our tier set up for those guys. Tonight, we are going to be going over our tiers for the wide receiver group. So looking at kind of like how those guys are bunched up, which players we have kind of in the same ranges as each other, and where they look like they're going right now in drafts. So, Caleb, any initial thoughts before we kick it off here?
Nope. Just gonna hit you guys with a little bit of news quickly. So camps are underway. You're already seeing some injuries pile up. Our boy again, sad rip, tear shed. Tim Patrick suffered Achilles tear. Guy just can't, gonna be 30 next year. Achilles are kind of a nagging / death injury when it comes to like her career. So we'll see how that goes. Jonathan Taylor, there's been a lot going around with him. Wants a contract, not going to get it. It has to be traded. Then you see him at practice. Heard that the team could hold him out for being back injured. I mean, just there's so much right now. It's hard to digress at all, to be honest. Hopefully give a little clarity there within the week or so. We don't know. I mean, it's kind of just a whole nutshell there. And then the Seattle Seahawks down both top RBs right now. Sounds like a groin strain from Ken Walker, which is a very nagging injury, usually about like 4 to 6 weeks recovery. And then Zach Charbonnet out with a shoulder injury. Doesn't say what. I don't know if he tore something or what, but definitely so that means no timetable. But big news that kind of just came out was Alvin Kamara is set to meet with Roger Goodell. So we might get a little, see what happens there. Possible suspension looming. We talked about a little bit again. But, that's, I guess, good news that we might hear some news finally from that whole situation, which has been kind of stagnant from all the way from a couple months ago. So that's it for now. I really don't want to get into too much of the news since we are going to have a little bit longer discussion here talking about our wide receiver tiers. Garrett, give a little recap of what tiers mean when it comes to drafting.
So tiers kind of help out when it comes to drafting within a group of players. So I used the example last week of if you're a player who's in a draft and you're coming around the bend, and say you have a pick in the late fourth round, and you have one running back left in a tier and maybe 3 wide receivers left in a tier, and you think to yourself, okay, I like some of these wide receivers, I like this running back. In this instance, tier-based drafting would tell you to draft one of the wide receivers first because you think, or draft that running back first. That way you grab him, and most likely one of those 3 wide receivers might make it back to you on the way around. Whereas in the other scenario, if you were to take the wide receiver, your running back might not make it back to you, and now you're stuck drafting a guy from a different group. Really, it's an opportunity to take a look at if you have, say, 7 players within a range, maybe they're all tier 3 players, you can take value where it is on the board and say, hey, this guy's going really early in ADP, but I got this guy in the same tier and he's 12 picks later. I'm going to jump on some opportunities elsewhere first and then hope the other guy falls to me at the next spot. So just, it's a good tool to utilize during your drafts to kind of help capitalize on, in the moment things that are happening while your draft is going on.
Yep. Thank you for that, Garrett. All right. Let's get with our tier.
You're welcome.
Let's get with our tier 1, the only tier that is the same. Garrett, who is the top guys in our tier 1?
So our tier 1 for wide receivers is pretty interesting this year because we've seen a little bit of a shift in drafts where right now wide receiver is kind of the first couple guys coming off the board. And for this season in particular, we have 3 top dogs. One is Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Cooper Kupp. I have Chase over Kupp, and you have Kupp number 2. So, we are very, very similar here. I think what it is like these 3 have pretty much just game-breaking ability. I think Justin Jefferson the last few years has shown that he's going to put up over 1,500 yards and just great catch numbers. He is kind of head and shoulders above the rest in terms of yardage that we saw last year. Cooper Kupp 2 seasons ago pretty much broke records, winning the Triple Crown. And then Jamar Chase, he's got an opportunity to go and put up 20 touchdowns this year. We saw him injured through through a sporadic bit of last season, but he's the kind of guy who could go put up 2-3 touchdowns any given night.
Yep.
And these three wide receivers really sit head and shoulders above the rest.
Yeah, there's a case for all three of them at the 101 in PPR type drafts for sure. You could, like I said, any kind of case could be made for that. So that is our top three here. Like Garrett said, the only difference is I have Kupp over Chase. Tier 2, this is where kind of we start filtering out into guys that we value a little bit more. I guess the first three in a row there are all the same for tier 2, but then I start to differentiate a little bit. So our tier 2 rankings here, both Garrett and I have Hill, Diggs, and Adam in that order, 4, 5, and 6. But this is where my tier 2 ends, and Garrett has a couple more there in that tier 2 range. I just think that there's a little bit of a difference where those three guys could all have a very solid case to finish as wide receiver 1. They're just a little bit older. That's the only reason they're falling that second tier for me compared to where Garrett has his difference here.
Yeah, and the way I looked at this group was these are guys that are bona fide studs that we've seen throughout the years put up big numbers. The next tier down for me is guys who can definitely get there, and they have a lot of upside. But I also have CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown with this tier 2 because I've seen those guys put up some big stats throughout the seasons, and we're expecting big things with them again this year. Not too much for changes in their offenses, so I think they sit pretty close behind Hill, Diggs, and Adams, who those three guys are veterans in the league, kind of getting closer to the end of their career than they are at the beginning. But they're bona fide studs and are bound to put up big stats again this year. So good to see that we are in the same page on how those three are ranked. But it looks like you're pretty close behind with Lamb and Brown towards the top of your tier 3.
Yeah. Definitely, I would say. I'm just going to go over my tier 3 here. My tier 3 is quite large. There's a lot of guys I like in that range right now. Guys who solid producers last year, but also guys who, like Garrett said, have that potential really to break out, but also put up like solid stats. Like it's not like they're going to cost you, like if they do replicate what they did last year. So I have in order CeeDee Lamb, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen, Chris Olave, and DeAndre Hopkins. That is my tier 3. Garrett, I'll go over your tier 3 here, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about some of our differences, because this is where we start seeing a big rank differential flux between the two of us.
Yeah, so I have Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle. Sorry, I've got a little gap here. Keenan Allen, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, Devontae Smith, Deebo Samuel, and DK Metcalf. And those guys aren't in order per se right there, but those guys I think I like kind of this slew of guys and kind of where they're at in drafts. They range anywhere from ADP of like 18 to in the 30s even. It looks like Deebo's dropped all the way to 40. And really it looks like I've got a couple of guys that you don't there. It's Devontae Smith, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, and DK Metcalf. Really, a lot of these guys are pretty young still in the league where, we've seen flashes. We've seen a good year or two. A little bit of question marks around like, all right, what does this season have in store for them that kind of separates them from the group above? But I really like the potential of a lot of these guys and their offenses. I think one person I'll single out here that you don't have quite as high is Deebo Samuel. Last year he came out, and now he's just talked about going into the season last year and about how big of a distraction his contract situation was. If you remember, they were kind of he was addressing it and talking about not wanting to be paid like a running back and taking less running back snaps. Well, they did that. He said, "Hey, I went into last season. I was really out of shape because I was so distracted by this."
Mm-hmm.
And now he's it's funny because there's clips of Kyle Shanahan talking about, "I've never seen so many shirtless pics of a gentleman other than Devo Samuel sending me updates on how in shape he is." So I'm buying into that a little bit. Just him returning back to what we saw 2 seasons ago when he put up 1,400 yards and just monster numbers that season. But yeah, those are kind of the separators for me. Kayla, you want to go over 2 year guys that you have in tier 3 that I don't?
Yeah, Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins. And this is where a big difference is. Actually, there's a differential between the two. They're each of 7 between Garrett and I. Amari Cooper, I have him at 12 right now. And last year, I was kind of aboard the like Amari Cooper like off the wagon kind of. Like there people were valuing him not that high. I was one of the people. Amari Cooper came out last year and kind of dominated there in Cleveland. Had one of his best seasons. Just looking up his sleeper where he finished at last year quickly here, but I know he was in that wide receiver 10 range.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where he was wide receiver 10.
Okay, and then the other one, I've always been a little higher on this guy, but the other one is DeAndre Hopkins. Yes, DeAndre Hopkins is 30. Yes, he went to Tennessee, low passing volume offense, but DeAndre Hopkins last year proved that he is still that guy when it comes to being a dominant wide receiver in the NFL. He obviously came out and was roughly wide receiver 7, I think, when he returned, Garrett, on a points per game basis,
Mm-hmm.
and just just a ball hog. And like I said, they don't throw the ball that much, but we've seen with the Tennessee offense support AJ Brown there for a couple big years, and yes, Burks is there. I don't think that this really eats into like Hopkins too much. Burks is great. Don't we are going to be probably a great player in the NFL right now. I think there's enough of the pie between those two to have fantasy relevance, because there's really nobody else in that passing game work. But like I said, I can't write off the ship yet of Hopkins not being one of these elite level asset wide receivers when time and time and again, he's proven that with horrible quarterback play like he had in Houston, he can ball out and be this stud. So there's just that, and like I said, I can't write him off yet, and that's where I have him right at the bottom here of this tier.
Yeah, your love for Hopkins will never waver, that's for sure.
No, no,
I think I could be convinced on Cooper, and he did have a pretty great finish. I pulled it up. He was wide receiver 9.5 PPR last year. So,
okay,
great finish to last year. I have him down at 19. He's right at the top of my tier 4. Really, I think this season there's some younger talent in that tier 3 that I think might take a next step. But Cooper is a bona fide player and wide receiver in the league that's done pretty well. So, yeah, I don't think he's in a bad place where he's at either. All right, so tier 4 for us. This is kind of where we are starting to get down to a couple players with some more question marks. Really, there's a lot to like from this group too, but it's players that are either in a different situation or something's happened over the last year for them. So for me, I look at this group. I have Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley, Drake London, DeAndre Hopkins, Jerry Jeudy, and DJ Moore. So I think there's good opportunity there for McLaurin. We've seen him kind of finish in the same place the last few years. He's a very safe pick, it feels like. Another quarterback change for him. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. Amari Cooper, and then Calvin Ridley is down at. Oh, you just switched it on me, sneaky. So
sorry.
Calvin Ridley, I have at wide receiver 20, and he is gaining a lot of steam right now. A lot of steam. So he's moving up draft boards. Drake London, we saw some flashes out of him. If the quarterback play can improve a little bit, I think he can take a step up. Jerry Jeudy in another situation where, like we just talked about, Tim Patrick is stepping out. With his injury and now more opportunity for Judy, we anticipate Russell Wilson to bounce back a little bit and regress to what we've seen from him in the past. And then, DJ Moore moving over into a new situation over in Chicago. So he's over there. There's good opportunity for him. We've kind of seen him be a wide receiver too throughout his career thus far. Usually good for about 1,000 yards and 4 to 6 touchdowns. Now, Justin Fields looking to take another step forward. I feel like where he's at right now could just be a little bit more of a floor play of like,
Mm.
hey, this is what we've seen out of him. This is kind of what we're expecting, something similar. There's a chance that he takes a step up.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like you're talking about there. My tier 4, T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Devonta Smith, DJ Moore, Debo Samuel, Drake Glennon, DK Metcalf, Christian Watson, and Jerry Judy. Solid wide receiver 2s in here, but also some dudes who I think could, get that wide receiver 1. You talked about right away, T. Higgins and Terry McLaurin. It feels like they finish in the same range of outcome every year, and they're safe bets at that range, and that's where I feel like their ADP should be relatively similar to like the rank there. And I mean, my ranks aren't far off what their ADP is going at currently. DJ Moore, I had a little lower on the list, and I usually don't buy camp hype, but you're hearing a lot of solid reports right now out of Chicago with the chemistry between DJ Moore and Justin Fields. And to be honest, they gave up a lot to get DJ Moore there. And the fact is the matter of there isn't a lot like a scary competition there with Mooney or Claypool. Both of them, Mooney, I guess, has had 1,000 yards, and Claypool had a good rookie season for the most part. But Claypool came into last year and really did not, do too well there after being what ended up being the 32nd pick he was traded for. And we've kind of heard some stuff that he's been lingering. Mooney is coming off of like a kind of a rough season, or where he didn't do too well, and then also injury as well. So I bumped DJ Moore up just a little bit, about 4 position ranks, and I dropped DK Metcalf down a little bit. Then again, it's like Seattle for me is one of the toughest wide receiving cores to rank right now. They probably, it's them or Chargers have the best wide receiving room in the NFL, in my opinion, right now. And you'll see with how Seattle is, I have their wide receivers ranked within 17 positions or 17 ADP of each other. So they're from JSN to Lockett, all of them. They're all very relatively similar. I just can't find a world where how to place them all the best. So this is the way I came up with it. This is what I feel most comfortable with drafting them at right now.
All right, so I got 3 guys that we're pretty far apart on here. We have Devonta Smith, I'm 6 spaces higher. Debo Samuel, I'm 7, and DK Metcalf, I'm 6. So let's look at Devonta Smith, the reception leader for the Eagles in that high-powered offense last year. Why do you hate him so much? You got to explain yourself here. This is ridiculous.
I
You
don't
got
hate
him
him. I still have him
all
at
the way
19.
down at 19.
I'm at 19 there.
He finished as wide receiver 10 last year.
I think that was his ceiling with AJ Brown in town right now. He obviously had a lot of receptions. That offense was very, very, very high power last year. I just think with adding to the running back room a little bit this year with Swift and Penny, that they could lean a little bit more that way towards the run game. Don't have to throw the ball as much. I guess I don't know. I could, like I said, I had a hard time putting myself into that, or Smith into that tier 3. To be honest, from 16 to 22, I would say those guys, I would be fine having it. That's where like the tier base like ranking here, I would be fine getting any single one of them.
Yeah.
To be honest, in that range for me, all the way down. Like I have to 25, but those guys I just feel like are all very similar possibility of outcomes here. Calvin Ridley, like you said, the offseason hype is just unreal right now, and I feel like 17 is a good spot for him. If he goes any higher, it gets kind of scary. That's where I have him on my rank, but his current ADP is wide receiver 20. I feel like I said, if it goes much higher, I'm not going to probably take him. But I
Mm-hmm.
think, really just that video, if you haven't seen it yet, Zay Jones ran a route and looked like, it was looked like a normal NFL player running a route. It looked like Calvin Ridley followed up. It looked like you took Zay Jones and put it in fast forward of 3 for Calvin Ridley. I mean, it was crisp. It was, and then you hear all these reports about how they're loving him there and all that stuff. It's just I was buying in on that. So yes, I don't hate all the way back. I don't hate Devonta Smith. I just don't have him in that tier level.
And I think one good thing I do want to point out too here is so you have quite a few guys. What is it? 10 players that are in your tier four, and this is the best thing you can point out for tier based drafting. So you have 10 players in your tier four. These are all guys that you think could foreseeably finish around the same spot at the end of the year last year. You like all these guys pretty similar. Right now, T. Higgins is going at wide receiver 26. And let's see, at the bottom of that group, we have Christian Watson is going at ADP of 54. So that's 2 rounds later that you're getting a guy of similarly perceived value. So perfect opportunity to point out that, hey, use these tiers to grab guys in similar ranges at a later ADP. And great thing to point out.
So Garrett, obviously our rankings are probably going to change by the time draft season comes around for us. This is
Mm-hmm.
kind of just a relevance factor. Who's one guy in this tier for you that you think could potentially climb?
So, one guy in this group, I think we might be expecting to rise a little bit more. Drake London. I think last year he had a good rookie season. He put up 800 some yards. But if we get a little bit more hype around how Desmond Ritter's looking, if he's passing the ball well, or if we get a few big clips, all of a sudden we could see him rising from that ADP of 52. He was the first wide receiver taken in last year's draft ahead of Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, some big names who are going quite a bit higher than him in this draft. If we get some more camp hype, similarly to what we're seeing from Calvin Ridley, then we could see him rise up draft boards.
Yeah. I would say for me, it's got to be Jerry Jeudy. I think Jeudy was wide receiver 6 last year. In the last 7 weeks, he kind of went on a tear there. Let me just look up quickly what he was doing. But yeah, I think we talked about the injury to Tim Patrick and also KJ Hamler, which we really didn't mention, is away from team. But Judy's last 5 weeks, 9 targets, 8 targets, 10 targets, 8 targets, 7 targets. And he was averaging around 100 yards a game. He had some real big monster games and then also had 3 touchdowns over that span as well. And so I'm not saying he averages that to the course of a year. That'd be crazy. But me and Garrett both expect Russell Wilson to come back to relevancy a little bit. Jerry Jeudy probably is going to be one of the biggest benefactors of Wilson coming back around to his normal self, where we've seen Wilson support DK and Lockett at both top 20 wide receiver levels, and so we know he can support at least 1, possibly 2 at that high.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my biggest riser for now, I would say.
All right, well, let's jump into our tier fives here. As we get further down, we're probably going to end most of our kind of running through the rankings around the end of the wide receiver 3 range. So around our 36th wide receiver overall, which kind of takes us through tier 5 for the both of us.
Mm-hmm.
My tier 5 starts with Christian Watson, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Hollywood Brown, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, and Mike Williams. So of this group, a lot of vets in there, a lot of guys who have put up 1,000-yard seasons and some pretty good numbers. Kayla, you want to run through yours?
Sure. My tier 5 is Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Hollywood Brown, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, Tyler Lockett, Mike Evans, and Michael Pittman and Juju Smith-Schuster. There is 2 huge outliers here in this tier 5 from between me and Garrett. I I guess I'll start. I am not real big on Mike Williams this year, where Garrett is right around ADP currently of Mike Williams. My biggest reasoning, QJ coming to town, and then secondly was kind of his spiral of the way last year went. He started off last year on a kind of a tear. Um, he had 4 targets week 1, and then 10, 6, 11, 13, 6, and 9, averaging right around a little over 100, 105 yards per game in that stretch there. So kind of going off. And then in the second or the later parts of the year, he had 6, 8, 4, 10, 5. So really, I'd say 2 games where he did, but his yards per game decreased pretty detrimental there, and he only had 1 touchdown there after week 11. And so QJ coming into town, Quentin Johnson, I actually have those two back to back right now. I couldn't. I only gave Mike Williams the edge over Quentin Johnson because of the veteran experience. I think Allen, first off, that's why Williams really started off that hot. Keenan Allen was out for the majority of the start of the year last year with that with a hamstring, I think it was, Garrett. And then he came back and was wide receiver 3 in receptions when he was back and healthy. So that alone eats out of Mike Williams' target share. Allen has been that way, I would say, the last 5 years since he's been healthy. He has been a monster in the reception game and a monster in the targets, which Garrett and I had him so high compared to kind of ADP right now. We actually had him both above the ADP for what he's been going for, but we both are liking Quentin Johnson. Me and Garrett both do. I was shocked actually for you to see Mike Williams that high. I just think with kind of the camp hype right now around Quentin Johnson, he looks like a baller. I think out of anybody affected, it's going to affect Mike Williams. And Mike Williams, throughout the course of his career, has been injured in every single season he has missed games. So that is a big benefactor of why I think so as well. I think you have to account for that. If the guys on year 5 are going into year 5 did get a big contract, but for him to miss games every single season, I think you got to have that factor in there that Quentin Johnson could thrive in those moments where we saw Joshua Palmer kind of excel last year, actually.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the reason why I still have some belief in Mike Williams is just the passing volume of this offense. A lot of the targets do go to Austin Eckler as well. Like he put up over 100 receptions last year, and that's not something to be overlooked. But at the same time, they like that downfield passing attack, and Mike Williams is the X that gets downfield. So I do also agree with you that Quentin Johnston can kind of eat into that same X wide receiver, outside catching role that Mike Williams has been in. But with the way that this offense runs and the way that Mike Williams can get you some long touchdowns, I think that's something that he can kind of make up some of that ground. Really, he's got some opportunity just because of the passing volume in that offense to still have some pretty good value. And at wide receiver 26, that's a wide receiver 3. I think, it might be an up and down year for you, but he could still end up finishing over there. And if one of the other receivers goes down, if Keenan Allen has another hamstring, all of a sudden that's another opportunity for him.
Yep. Yeah, Mike Williams, a great best ball player.
You mentioned we have 2 other guys that we're a little bit further apart on. I have Michael Pittman Jr. and Juju Smith-Schuster quite a bit lower than you have them. You have those guys ranked at 30 and 34 respectively. I have them at 43 and 40. Just to explain myself on these guys, Michael Pittman Jr., last year I was very high on him because I expected some high passing volume from Matt Ryan. This year is kind of the opposite. I'm kind of backing off on him, and I do not have very high expectations for him in that offense. Really, he's more of the reception specialist, high volume kind of guy that you want to see, and Alec Pierce is going to be the downfield threat. If we look at Anthony Richardson, he can sling the ball. He can throw it a mile. And they've already remarked on how quick and fast and powerful his release is and how well he throws it downfield. But the primary thing he's going to do if he is the leading quarterback in that room is he is going to run the ball a good amount. And his intermediate passing accuracy has not been something that has been very highly regarded thus far.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, we look at Juju Smith-Schuster going from his situation in Kansas City over to New England. New England's got a slew of kind of these, project wide receivers that have flashed in the pan. Um, they just gave Devontae Parker some money again, and he's kind of been a reclamation project that they would hope would work out. He was okay for them last year. They have Tyquan Thornton, who was a second round pick, who didn't seem to really amount to anything special. I do think that offense does a little bit better this year. I just don't know which wide receiver it'll be, and I don't know if I trust Juju enough to really move him up much higher than where I have him at 40. There are some other wide receivers that are going around where he is that I feel like have a higher upside. I feel like even where he's at, his upside is kind of capped at like maybe a low end wide receiver. I don't know, wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't foresee him being a good wide receiver 2 by the end of the year.
No. And see, this is where I view Juju as a safe option. I kind of talked about how I like Juju this year. He was one of my undervalued players. Finished as wide receiver 27 last year in PPR. Jacoby Myers finished as wide receiver 30. I talked about how he's probably going to fill that type Jacoby role. They really, like you talked about, they got kind of a slew of these middling wide receivers right now. But the thing that Juju has compared to the other ones, he's primary slot guy. Juju's been a big reception guy for a lot of his league, besides probably his rookie year or second year, I'd say, where he was a big yak guy. But last year he had quite a few catches, with not much on the touchdown game. Only had 3 touchdowns last year. But like I said, I feel like at wide receiver, what do I have him at right here?
30?
What was that?
30 for
34.
34.
Yeah, so I have him as a low end wide receiver 3. I feel like that's probably right about where to take him. He could probably be a flex play guy type weekly, and average you right around 10 points a week. And that's kind of what you're getting at when you're drafting in that range. You might be hitting some home run hitters, but I feel like he's one of those guys, say you took a riskier pick early on, he's a safer option there. So that's why I like him at that 34. Like you said, I don't see a world where Juju Smith is finishing above wide receiver 20. I don't see that upside, but I also don't see where he finishes below 50. If he gets in, unless bearing injury. But I feel like he's, like I said, gonna get you around 900 yards, get you right around 70 grabs or so, put you in that wide receiver 30 to 40-ish range.
Right. So the next, we're like I said, we're not going to go too much further past our wide receiver 3 range. But I think one thing we can do here is there are 4 rookie first round wide receivers that were taken in this past year's draft, who are all in the tier 6 for us. So
Yep.
it's this next group of players: Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Quentin Johnston, and Zay Flowers. Of this group, Caleb, who do you think has the highest upside, and who are you most interested in actually drafting?
I think I gotta go with Jordan Addison. He's my top ranked rookie right now. Biggest reason being, they throw the ball a lot in Minnesota. He literally doesn't have much competition there to be that wide receiver 2. KJ Osborne did flash a little bit last year. I do think Addison outcompetes him. Pretty skilled route runner, Addison is. I like the overall of Jackson Smith and Njigba. I just don't know. Like I talked about, I have JSN at 39, and I have DK Metcalf at 23. So, and I have Lockhart right in the middle at 32. So there's a lot of mouths to feed there, but I think they all can be successful. And I think if one of them goes down with injury, the other 2 are going to thrive. You can't tell who that's going to be or what's going to happen there, or if they all stay healthy, what their roles are. And JSN has looked good in camp so far, but I think Addison, just on volume alone, has the highest floor based off volume right now. I'm expecting.
Yeah. Is it just the wide receiver 3 factor between JSN and Quentin Johnston versus the fact that Addison's pretty much got a good opportunity at wide receiver too, and Zay Flowers even has an opportunity to be the number one in his
Yeah,
offense.
yeah. That's the biggest reason. Flowers, I just don't know if his skill set type can carry over that big wide receiver one role. If he can get a hyper amount of targets and succeed at that high level like that, where I think Addison could thrive at that wide receiver two role with Jefferson getting a lot of that attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those four will be interesting to kind of see how they open up the gate or how they come out of the gates at the start of the year. And really, like, it's possible that we just see, a flash in the pan at the beginning. And, all of a sudden these guys are high, guys that you want to get after, whether it's make trades to go get them, whether it's, make waiver ads even. It's
Mm-hmm.
possible that if you're in a 10-team league, these guys might not be rostered right away.
Yep. So yeah, I saw that we both actually have Addison as our top rookie for the year currently. We one away from each other. I have him at 35, you have him at 36, and so we both value him as a low wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I like his opportunity with Adam Thielen gone, being able to step in. It seems like KJ Osborne, while he has had some good games, really hasn't been able to seize that number two role. Addison was good, really good 2 years ago, winning the Blitnikoff Award, and then last year had some struggles, but also had some injuries throughout the season. It's going to be really interesting, just coming into their first season and seeing who steps forward. It seems like every year now there's a handful of wide receivers that, they're rookies. They come in, we're really excited about them, and they're ready to play right away, which didn't used to be the case.
So Garrett, I did notice there's one player we're both extremely low on. We actually didn't even have him. So Garrett and I spanned this out to our top 50. And this guy is currently ADP wide receiver 39, ADP 91 overall. And that is Kadarius Toney. Is are we? Is this, you think, just a benefactor of the recent knee swell up, or would you have drafted him higher? You think, based off of that, what you hear pre that knee injury?
Well, I think before his injury and kind of what we heard come out, I had him ranked. I think it was in the 30s, and then I had to adjust it. I believe I had him low 30s. But it's just one of those things that, hey, here's yet another injury for Kadarius Toney. It seems like it's a never-ending list from him. It's always something new. It's not like the same nagging thing that's going on and on again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's never any good news with him. And if he can't stay on the field, like that's just another indicator that he's not going to have enough play time.
Yeah.
There's hasn't been enough indicator that either that he has enough chemistry, enough time on the field with Mahomes, where all of a sudden they're going to be in sync all the time, and he can just come back from injury and be ready to go right away. We have no idea. Like we just haven't seen him on the field enough. So while he still does like pose some value, I mean, Andy Reid came out and said he's not even going to be sure if he's ready week one.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're both on the same train there, and the uncertainty of the Chiefs wide receivers last year. It was so hit or miss on a lot of these guys for what we were seeing with these wide receivers, and I think we're both kind of on that same pattern. Like, don't really know who to trust right now out of the gates. So that's where we're kind of both in the relative factor there. But Garrett, anything else with the wide receiver tiers, or is that all we got for him today?
No, I think that covers up the tiers pretty well. I think at a later date we can cover some of our favorite sleepers that are further
Mm-hmm.
down that we weren't able to talk about today. But coming up on our next episode, we're going to be going through our running back tiers. You guys should expect something similar, some comparisons, some ranges, and guys who we like kind of at the bulk of the start of the draft.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it's going to be a very interesting episode based off of the whole uncertainty with the running backs right now. Um, like that's kind of a big topic right now in the NFL, and we'll see how it affects into our rankings.
Yeah, and I think one cool thing for this year too is there's some years that you have your top 12, your top 15 running backs, and then there's just nobody for so long, and then it's big question marks, guys who are backups, guys who are this that. This year it seems like the top 24 you can make good cases for a lot of the guys to be either getting a lot of work in the passing game, work in the running game, touchdown opportunity, new players in new situations, ambiguous backfields. There's just a lot of things to talk about, a lot of things to like, and there's a good amount of running backs that you can capitalize on value right now. So, like we said, it should be a good episode, and we're excited to have you guys with us next time. For now, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.